Welcome, my dear students. Today I came with lecture number 5. In this lecture, today we are going to see introduction of SDLC in software engineering. Here SDLC means software development lifecycle. This one is the 5th lecture of Unit 2. So Unit 2 name is Software Lifecycle Models. So Unit 2 I started. So this is the 5th lecture as per our SBT syllabus. So the paper we have software engineering and the code of the subject is 1618504. This code is given by State Board of Technical Education, and the content of today's lecture is totally based on the SBT syllabus for diploma course. So this is the content of our today's lecture. What we are going to see in this lecture today. So we will see the introduction part of the SDLC. Then we will have an overview of the software development lifecycle. Then we have some phases, and each phases of the SDLC has their own uniqueness and specification. Then we will see how the SDLC software development lifecycle flow, which phase will come first and which phase will come next. So that part we will see in the flow of the SDLC. Then last we will see the model. So we have numbers of models in SDLC software development lifecycle. So we will see all in this lecture one by one. And lastly, I just gave the reference. You just go through it. Now, the introduction of SDLC. So, SDLC model is used to give the framework. Framework is nothing but it describes the activities performed at each stage of the software development project. So first point of the SDLC says that it is a framework. SDLC is a framework which used to describe the activities performed in each stage of the software development project. Second point says that SDLC is a process used by the software company to design, to develop and test the high quality software. So this SDLC process helps us to design, develop and test high quality software. Third point says here, the aim of the quality software to produce means we want to meet the customer expectation. That means SDLC model having the aim to produce the quality software which meet or exceeds the customer expectation within the time and the budget. Dear students, I have mentioned here within the time and budget. That means each customer having some budget and having some deadline. Based on that time and deadline or budget, SDLC having an aim to produce the quality software which meet the expectation of the customer. So this is the SDLC phases. As I told you, in the content we will see the phases of the SDLC. So these are the phases. in the SDLC, software development lifecycle project, when we will use this one. So first we have a requirement analysis. Once we got the requirement from the client, we analyze on it, then we will define the requirement. Once it will be defined it correctly, then we will go for the designing part of the defined requirement. Then based on the designing, we put in the program or source code. Once the coding part is done, then we will go for the testing. That means whether our software having bugs or it free of bugs. So that comes under the testing. Once the testing will be complete, then we can go for the deployment part. That is the second last phase of the SDLC, that is called deployment. Once the deployment is done, the last and the big stage is called maintenance. This maintenance feedback will be get it from the client or customer side. So these are the phases of the SDLC. We will see one by one in the next slide. Dear students, again the same thing I have give as a text wise. So planning and requirement analysis, the first phase of the SDLC, defining requirements, design the software, building or develop the software, testing the software, deployment and maintenance. The last slide, that means previous slide, deployment and maintenance both are separate, but I combine together because both are very related to one another. We will see this all phases one by one now. Now phases and documents. So each phase is associated with some documents, because documents play an important role in the field of development life cycle. So planning, when we are go for the planning, which document we are going to maintain? The document name is BRD. So business requirement documents. So these documents is going to be prepared during the planning. Once the planning stage is done, then analysis we will do. Based on the BRD, we will do the analysis. Again, BRD means business requirement document. So this become the input for the analysis, and during the analysis we are going to be prepare another document that is called SRS. The full form of SRS is software requirement specification. So the input of the analysis phase is BRD and output is of the analysis phase is SRS. So this is the second stage analysis. Next we can go for the designing. So designing is done based on the SRS, that is software requirement specification, and the output of the designing is HLD, DLD. HLD stands for high level design or DLD stands for digital life design. So this becomes the output of the design phase. So dear students, the design phase having input as a SRS and output as a HD, HLD or DLD. Once the designing is done based on the SRS, then we can go for the coding. That means we are going to be put it into a program that is called source code. Once the coding is done, we will go for the testing. Again we have a number of test cases or testing process. We will go all the testing and we can find out the error which is available or which is present in our software. So once the testing is done, then finally deployment and maintenance part will be coming. So these are the documents we are going to be maintained in each stages of or phases of SDLC. I hope my dear student it's clear for you. Now planning and requirement analysis. So this is the fundamental stage in SDLC. This is called fundamental stage in SDLC. Why? Because it performed by the senior member of the team. Planning and requirement analysis is performed by the senior member of the team. They will take the input from the all stakeholders and experts, or they will take the help from the small or middle scale enterprises in the industry. So they will do this planning and requirement analysis can be done by the senior member or expert person with concern of expert person or stakeholders. Again, planning refers the quality assurance. Planning refers the quality assurance and identification of the risk associated with the project. They are also analyzing during this. So requirement analysis means they are going to be analyze the quality assurance and they are also going to be analyze the risk which is associated with the project. Now, requirement analysis. Requirement analysis, one planning, then requirement. So once we got the planning, we have some idea about the requirement. Now based on the requirement, we are going to be analyze it. So this can be done by the help of business requirements, stakeholder requirements, solution requirements. Inside the solution requirements, we have two types: functional requirements and non-functional requirements and transition requirements. So dear students, planning is done, requirement we got it from the customer. Now based on the requirement, we are going to be analyze it. And I told you, requirement analysis is done by the help of expert person, by the help of senior team member with concern with the domain expert, a stakeholder. Sure. So same way, these are the points we are concerning when we are going for the analysis of the requirement. Now, defining the requirements. When we analyze the requirement, now we will define the requirements. So, once the requirement analysis is done, the next step we have is to define and documents. What we have a next step? Requirement analysis is done. Then next we are going to be define it. And what we define it, we are going to be documented it. The software requirement, and then finally once defined and documented part will done, then we can go for the approval from the project stakeholders. Dear students, here defining requirement means once the analysis of the requirement is done, the next step we have to define and document the software requirement. And once documentation is done, then we can go for the approval from the project stakeholders. So this done through SRS. The SRS stand for software requirement specification. So as I told you, this is one of the important documents, and based on these documents, other all stages will work, because this become the this will become the agreement paper between the customer and the developer. That is called software requirement specification. The document which consists all the product requirements to be designed and developed during the project life cycle. As I told you, it consists all the product requirements to be designed. That means based on the SRS, the development team is going to be design it and develop the project. Next we have the same continuous defining requirements. We have some points we will keep in our mind. That is called enterprise analysis. Based on the enterprise analysis, we are going to be designing. Business analysis, planning and monitoring, we have to be concerned. Requirement analysis, what we have requirement during the analysis we done, that is also keep in our mind while we going to be define the requirements. Requirement management and communication, that is also one of the point we have to keep in our mind when we are going to be define the requirement. And solution assessment and validation, that means validation and verification, these are the two important steps and ongoing steps till the end of the software development. Now designing the software. So based on the requirement specified in SRS, as I told you, everything what is written in the SRS, based on that we are going to be design it. So the based on the SRS, the designing or development people will be work. So what they will do, they will propose two or more than two design approach as an architect to the, they will propose designing approach to the architect for the approval as a document. In other words, we can say, my dear students, based on the SRS, designing team will approach for the product architect and documented in DDS. DDS stands for this design document specification. That means once the designing team work with the SRS, they will propose two or more design approach to the architecture, and the architecture will be approved anyone, and that is also documented, and that documentation is called design document specification. So this DDS is reviewed again. This design approach which will documented in DDS is reviewed by the stakeholders based on the various parameters. So again, that after the designing, that means during the designing, they what they are designing people will do, they will design it and document it, and that documentation is known as design document specification. And this design document specification is reviewed by the stakeholders based on certain parameters like risk assessment, design modularity, budget and time constraint. And finally, based on all these four parameters, the stakeholders will be pick out any one of the approach, and finally based on that, the development will be start. So dear students, in the designing phase, based on the SRS, the development people work, and they will propose more than one design approach to the architect and documented in the DDS. Based on the DDS, the stakeholder will be reviewed it. During the review, the stakeholders having some parameters like risk assessment, design modularity, budget, time constraint, and finally in 2 or 3 design approach or proposal, they will pick any one, and that become the final, and that will be go for the coding part. So developing the software, in this stage SDLC, the actual development start. Dear students, from this stage the actual development will be start for the software development phase, because developing the software, because designing part is over. Now based on the designing part, the development, that means coding, will be start. The programming code is generated as per the DDS during this stage. As I told you, DDS means designing document specification. So based on this, the development team start to do the coding. So developers have to follow the coding guidelines defined by their organization and program tools like compiler, interpreter, debuggers. Now, so once they started to go for the developing the software, this program or software, they have to follow some guidelines. Guidelines means each programming language they are having some guidelines, code guidelines or rules or regulation, which is organized, which is defined by the organization or programming tools. So compiler is one of the translates, so just like a translator or interpreter, debugger, etc. are used to generate the implement the code. So development is started. Now once the development is done, that means programming is done, then we can go for the testing. This testing, that means we are going to check out whether our software having any error or it is free from the error. So we have to go for the testing. So however, the test stage refer to the testing only the stage of the software where the defects are reported. That means this testing will be done from the first stage itself, but here the testing refer means we can go for the software testing. Now deployment and maintenance. So once the testing will be done, we assure that our product does not carry any error, then we can go for the deployment. That means we can go for the reporting part. So based on the once the software is tested and no bugs or errors are reported, then it is deployed. That means then it is starting for packing or for any documentation paper for the customer side. So once it will be deployed, then it will be go for the maintenance part. Then based on the feedback, software may be released as it is or with suggested enhancement in the target segment, or if any enhancement is required in the software, we can do it, and then finally we can deploy to the market. And after the deployment is done, then we can go for the maintenance part. Maintenance part is one of the important and big phase of the SDLC, because maintenance we can get it from the customer ends. So that is help for the enhancements of the software, or it's help for the upgrading, uplifting of the software. So this is the last phase of the SDLC, software development life cycle. Now this is the summary of the SDLC phase, how it's working. Phase 1 formation, phase 2, phase 3 design, phase 4 construct, phase 5, phase 6 and phase 7. So what we discussed till now, everything I represented here in a picture ways. So it's help you to make you more clear for your understanding. Now reason for why we can using the SDLC. So we have a number of reasons. So it will give project planning, estimation, scheduling, provide the framework for standard set of terminology, provide mechanism for the project tracking and control. It also helps to increase the visibility of the project progress to all stakeholders. So these are the reasons why we can go for SDLC model. Now when we are going to be choose the SDLC, we can choose this correctly for the development of software, because it's having some advantages. What are the advantages? Increase development speed. If we choose the correct SDLC model, it will increase the development speed, product quality, tracking control, it will improve. It will also improve the client relationship, and it will also decrease the project risk. Every project there is a risk, so it will decrease the project risk when we can choose the appropriate SDLC, and it will also decrease the project management overhead. Now this is the advantage of the SDLC, as already we discussed in the previous slide. Focus on trade-off, focus on goal. It helps us to focus the exact goal of our software. Control, milestone, checklist, accountability. That means by using the SDLC, it will help us to be complete our software development stage within the time limit. Tools, model and cases. What are the things we are going to be using? It helps us to track it properly. Hierarchical decomposition. It helps us to follow the hierarchy. We should not go here and there. It will be pakka framework, so we can go as per the framework, and it helps us to complete our project within the deadline. So these are the advantages of the SDLC. Now we have a number of SDLC models. We have waterfall model, iterative model, spiral model, agile model, V model, Big Bang model, RAID model and prototype model. We will see this all models one by one in the upcoming video lecture. Thank you, my dear friends. This is the summary. I hope what I discussed, it is clear for you. We have seen the overview of the SDLC phase. I completely explained about the phases, advantages, and what are the advantages of choosing the correct SDLC model, and we also discussed about the which SDLC model is good for which type of a software development. So these are the summary. I hope it is clear for you. Now reference, we can go through this reference. It will be help you and enhance your knowledge. Thank you, my dear students. Thank you.